to make our way through John's Gospel, and we are in John chapter 19. We'll be focusing on verses 17 through 27 this morning. But as I so often do, I want us to start by just allowing ourselves to be inspired by some words of by a true story of a real person who had a real moment. I'm just trying to quickly fix some issues I'm having with the live stream. If you give me a quick second. And that one. That's better. Okay. That should be fixed now. Like I say, we are in John chapter 19, but I want us to begin by imagining you were just 12 years old. At that age, most of us, I think, would be worried about making friends at school, or playing sports, or video games, perhaps the clubs that we're involved in, or the pastimes that we have. But not Caleb Woodrum. Caleb was just 12 years old, living in Blanchard, Oklahoma, when his world changed forever. By the time he was in middle school, his mom, Stacy, had been diagnosed with a whole host of life-threatening issues. It's a list of medical conditions that is as long as my arm, and that I couldn't even begin to pronounce most of them. But the simple reality was, her body was breaking down, and her life at home had become a constant battle to survive. At age 12, this young boy, Caleb, overheard the doctors tell his mother something that struck fear in his heart. You don't have much time left. Caleb, though, he didn't hesitate. Instead of retreating into his own world of school and friends, he stepped up in a way that most adults would even find overwhelming. From that moment on, Caleb became her caretaker. He took charge of making sure she made it to all of her doctor's appointments. He insisted on her taking all of the medication she'd been prescribed and doing all of the things that the doctors had encouraged her to do to make the most of the time that she had left. He helped her around the house. He even assisted with tasks most teenagers wouldn't dream of. Organising the home, cleaning the bathroom, cooking the meals, even staying up late to monitor condition late into the night when she wasn't feeling well. And he did this while still bearing the burden of being a middle school student. He had homework and class projects and everything else that goes with it. I'm sure if you asked Izzy, she would tell you it's an awful lot. But he never complained. When asked why he took so much responsibility at such a young age, his answer was simple. Because she's my mum. She took care of me. Why wouldn't I take care of her? 6 years after she was first diagnosed, 6 years after the doctors said she only had a short time to live, it became clear her time was indeed short. All she'd ever wanted was to see Caleb graduate. And so rather than graduating at school with his friends, Caleb had his own private graduation ceremony right there in the hospital with the person that mattered most to him, his mum. She passed away just a few days later. But the truth was, she got everything that she wanted. And Caleb set for her and for so many others an example of what determination and strength really are. His actions spoke louder than words ever could, and they spoke of a very significant truth. Love doesn't ask, what am I owed? Love asks, what can I give? Though Caleb's example of selfless love is inspiring to us, it should be, it's also but a shadow of the fullness of what the greatest act of selfless love truly looks like. And that is an act that is on full display during the verses we'll look at today. In the midst of one of the most horrific events a person could experience, we also see one of the most incredibly intimate and human moments. So let's read together the story, and let's hold on to that question. What can I give? Because that question, it shapes the entire story of the cross and challenges us even today. What does love ask of us? What can I give? John chapter 19, beginning at verse 16. That's actually kind of midway through verse 16. So they took Jesus, and he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him two others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Aramaic, Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but rather, this man said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, I have written what I have written. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 pieces, one part for each shoulder, also his tunic. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture which says, they divided his garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So the soldiers did these things. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. And then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. That is the verse we'll be focusing on this morning. And it begins with some very interesting and powerful words. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull. There they crucified him. That idea, carrying his cross, carrying his burdens, it is incredibly significant. At age 12, Caleb carried responsibilities far beyond his years. He took on the burden of caring for his mother, but love compelled him to bear that weight. And at times we all carry burdens that are seemingly beyond our own ability to bear. Yet I hope our prayer is always that we will have the strength to carry them. And certainly doing it out of love can make that so much easier. Yet the truth is, in Scripture, the Holy Spirit himself inspires Paul to write down words preserved to this day where God calls our afflictions light and momentary in comparison to an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison that they're preparing us to. That's 2 Corinthians 4:17 and 18. But that can be a hard pill to swallow. In the midst of our trials, that God would refer to them as light and momentary, that doesn't always add up with our experience of them, right? How can this be? Is God really that flippant and uninterested in our suffering here and now that he would call the worst and heaviest and most painful experiences of our lives just light and momentary? I know people for whom that was the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to their faith. The idea that God just didn't seem to care. But actually it couldn't be further from the truth, because we must remember that the same God who inspired Paul to write those words also knew suffering and affliction that we can't even begin to imagine. John doesn't share many of the details about Jesus' journey to the cross, nor does he share particularly a lot of details about the cross itself. He doesn't go into quite as much detail as some of the other gospel authors do. Indeed, his description of the journey to Golgotha, the place of the skull, is limited to just 7 words in our English Bible, even less, just 5 if you read it in the original Greek. He went out bearing his own cross. Though these words are simple, in some ways I think that highlights the weight of them all the more. The truth is, the weight Jesus was carrying, it's a weight that can't even be expressed with words. No amount of words would truly do justice to what was going on there. Because yes, on the one hand, Jesus, beaten and bloodied, is carrying the literal weight of a cross, probably just the cross piece that would be strapped across his back, a large wooden beam or log. But this isn't really what John is emphasizing here. The weight of the cross itself, it would have been significant. But the weight of what the cross represents, that is truly what Jesus is bearing here. As he takes up his cross, he's carrying not only a wooden beam, but the weight of the sin of the whole world, of everyone who he was sent to save. His love didn't ask how much is too much. Indeed, Jesus had the full power of heaven at his side. At any moment he could have called down armies of angels to strike everyone down and release him from this. But at no point did he use that privilege or that prerogative. Because of love, he willingly endured the ultimate sacrifice. The truth is, that burden, that weight of sin, it is rightfully ours to carry. It may seem like too much to bear, and in a very real way, it is. All of us sin, all of us fall short of God's standard, all of us come up short when compared to his perfection, what he asks of us. And ultimately, the weight of that sin, the cost of that sin, is death, eternal separation from God. Yet willingly and freely, Jesus doesn't just carry my sin, a sin that isn't his to bear, nor yours. He carries the weight of each and every person that will accept his forgiveness throughout all time and eternity. Out of love, he makes the ultimate sacrifice and carries that burden. If we are weighed down by the burden of our own sin, of our own failures, imagine what it would be like to carry the weight of the sin and failure of every man and woman and child throughout history who would believe in him. Out of love, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. Out of love, he carries the ultimate burden. True love, I think, is most powerfully demonstrated through sacrifice. It's easy to do the right thing when it doesn't cost us very much. It's easy to do the right thing when it's easy. But when it's costly, when it requires something of us, when it's not easy, when it's painful, that is where true love is really demonstrated. Which, in light of the burdens that Jesus carried for us, leaves us all with a question, doesn't it? If he carried the burden of my sin for me, what might he be calling me to carry for others? What could he be asking me to sacrifice of myself, of ourselves, time, comfort, self-interest, whatever it may be, out of love? Remember, love asks, what can I give? Jesus gave his life for us. What are we willing to give for him and for others? Or perhaps more importantly, is there anything we're not willing to give if he asked us? And if there is, let's examine our hearts in light of his sacrifice and ask ourselves, why? The God who did not withhold his own son, the God that willingly laid down his own life for us, who gave everything. What is it that he doesn't deserve from us that we shouldn't be willing to give as well? Next thing for us to remember and focus on this morning is this. Love sees beyond the pain. At the beginning we read, or towards the end we read these words. Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby. It's interesting. Despite the emotional weight of watching his mother suffer, Caleb didn't let the weight of the situation paralyze him. He looked beyond his own struggles, and undoubtedly he had many at that time in his life. But he focused on caring for his needs. Those who matter most to us, our friends, our closest family members, those that we care for the most, they'll always have our attention, right? Sacrifices that we make for them, they'll always feel worth it. And so in the midst of unimaginable physical and emotional pain, Jesus doesn't focus inwards. Don't get me wrong, at that moment he has every reason to not be focusing on anything else but the situation at hand. In that moment, physical pain is racking his body. Every breath would have been excruciating. And on top of that, there is a much bigger situation unfolding. There is this eternal cosmic event happening in that moment, the very reason he came to earth. And yet, just for a moment in the middle of it all, he looks out. He sees his mother and John, the disciple, and responds with compassion and care. His love extends beyond his suffering. John and the other authors, they pick out a myriad of other things that are going on at this moment. Some of them record the interaction with the other thieves on the cross. That moment where one of them seems to recognize him for who he is, and that promise, today you will be with me in paradise, is offered. Others focus on those words that Jesus speaks from the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. John, he highlights the prophetic significance of various events going on. The sign written by Pilate that was hung above his head, the division of his clothes by the soldiers. And each of these things matter. Each of these things are worthy of our attention. But in the middle of it all, John inserts this Greek word, day. We translate that word but, and really that is what it means. It gets used in the same way as we use that word but perhaps even more so in the Greek. It serves to carve out this section from everything else that's happening. It's a point of delineation, a point of deviation from everything else that is happening. It contrasts this moment that we're about to read about from all of the other stuff. In spite of his pain, in spite of his burdens and his challenges, in spite of the cosmic and eternal significance of this moment, the once and for all spiritual victory that is being won at that very moment, Jesus still finds an incredibly and intimately personal moment. And John doesn't keep that for himself. He records it for all of us. Because the reality is, Jesus' death is both universal and cosmic and infinitely significant in an eternal sense. But his death is also supremely personal and incredibly intimate for each of us who believe in him. At that moment, Jesus focuses not only, I think, on those two individuals. He carves out not only space for these two people, but in the same way for all of us who will accept his offer of grace through all ages. Indeed, in Ephesians, Paul reminds us that even as he hung on the cross, you and me, each of us who are his people, were on his mind, personally. We're told that he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that in love he predestined you and me for adoption to himself as sons. Because of the cross we have redemption through his blood. This is, again, all there in Ephesians. And forgiveness of our trespasses or sins. Because of the riches of his grace, he not only saves us, but lavishes his love and mercy on us. And all of that we view through the lens of the cross. Jesus doesn't go to the cross because he needs it. He goes to the cross because we need it. You and me, each of us, personally. And because he goes because he loves us too much not to. C.S. Lewis, he paints a powerful word picture of this. He writes these words: love as hard as nails, love is nails, blunt, thick, hammered through the medial nerves of the one who, having made us, knew the thing he had done, seeing with all that is our cross and his. When we're in difficult situations, it's tempting, I think, to focus solely on our own pain, and that's natural. But Christ calls us to lift our eyes, to see others in need, and love them even through our own hurt. Who might God be asking you to see today? Love asks, what can I give? And sometimes that's the gift of attention and care, even when we're hurting ourselves. Which then leads us to our third and final point today. Love provides for the future. John said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. Caleb's actions, they weren't temporary. He stayed committed to his mother's care for years, 6 years in total, until her dying day, making sure what she needed, that she had what she needed, day after day after day. And as anyone who's cared for someone in that kind of situation will know, they are long and painful days. His love, though, it wasn't a one-time gesture. It was a provision for the long haul. And likewise, Jesus entrusts Mary to John's care, ensuring that she, too, would be looked after when he was gone. It's a very human and practical provision in one way. And it's a blessing for both of them. But as R. Kent Hughes points out, for John, his blessing came in the form of additional responsibility. After all, John still had his own mother to care for. Delightful as she most certainly was, Mary was, undoubtedly, at times, a burden. She was blessed, but like all of us, she was a sinner. Christ's care for us may come in the form of responsibility. We would like to think that the more we love God, the less he will ask of us, and the lighter our burdens will become. But that's not necessarily so. If we love Jesus, he will make use of our love. Jesus' care for John came in the form of burden, but that burden was a blessing. Unique responsibilities are placed on those who possess great love for the Lord. Some of our burdens are in fact blessings. Again, that's R. Kent Hughes. Jesus provides for the physical needs of his mother. But at the same time, he's also providing so much more. John is not only there to care for Mary physically. After all, John has been called, like all of the others, to be a disciple. He is an apostle of Jesus. He's given that task to proclaim the gospel, to shepherd Christ's flock, to care for his people, the church. I genuinely believe in that moment where John and Mary get spoken to by Jesus here, when they get singled out and knit together in this unique and special way. That's the moment that John's flock, as it was, begun. That is when he was called to start shepherding Christ's people. On the cross, Jesus is not merely providing for his mother's physical needs, but also ensuring her eternal destiny, and ensuring that until they see one another face to face again, until she meets with Jesus in glory, her spiritual well-being will be provided for. There's a few extra-biblical traditions about what happened in the days that follow. The Bible doesn't really tell us very much. But based on one of the verses here, that verse where it says that he welcomed her into his home, there became this tradition that says that Mary stayed with John in his home in Jerusalem for 11 years. That for 11 years she was his only focus. And only after she passed away did he begin his gospel ministry. It's an interesting tradition, but it doesn't ring true to me. It doesn't match with the kind of man we know John was, the way he was committed to sharing the gospel throughout the world. I much prefer the other tradition that says Mary died in Ephesus, not Jerusalem. That though indeed John kept her in his home moved all throughout the world as he shared the gospel with those around us, and that Mary joined him on those missionary journeys throughout the Gentile world. I prefer the tradition that says that she became a pillar of his local expression of church until the day she died. I think that feels a lot more what Jesus is talking about here when he trusts them into their care. He's not only focused in this moment on physical needs. He understands the far greater need that all of us have. And so, of course, he would entrust his beloved mother into the care of someone he's also entrusted his beloved bride, the church. Because of what's happening on the cross, Jesus knows that Mary and John and all of those he is at that very moment saving from the peril of sin are being made eternally whole. Loving others means thinking ahead, making sure their needs are met, not just for today or even for tomorrow, but most importantly, for eternity. As Christ's people, we must all ask the question, how will we be being called to provide for the needs of those that he loves? Not just physically or emotionally, though those things really do matter, but also spiritually. Love asks, what can I give? And at times that does mean providing physically or ensuring their emotional well-being is cared for. But there is an even more fundamental answer, I think, to this question. And it's surprisingly simple. The greatest gift of all, the greatest gift that we can give to anyone, especially as we think about giving this Christmas season, is the gift of Jesus. The best way we can truly care for someone is to ensure we do whatever we can to help them meet him for themselves the way that we have. Yesterday I got into a really interesting conversation on the app Threads. I don't know if any of you know it. It's kind of Facebook's version of Twitter. It's designed for these kind of short, brief, kind of, here's my thoughts, I'm going to dump them out into the world. I'd replied to a post on Threads, which has since been deleted, but basically it was kind of calling out the church in the West. Hey, we'd forgotten the golden rule of don't judge, and that we should leave people alone. Specifically, it was in reference to things like Christians who speak on the topics of gender and sexuality and abortion and all of those hot-button issues. Since, according to this person, Jesus never did, neither should Christians, and instead should let everyone be who they are. My response, it was pretty straightforward. I just laid out that I don't think that is particularly true. I think that the most important thing that we can do is to speak the truth. In fact, if you give me a quick second, I can put it up on the screen if you want to have a read of what I said to them in that moment. There we go. That is what the response that I gave. And I think, hopefully, you'll agree, it was a pretty fair response. But at a certain point, another person, not the original poster, jumped in. They replied, and I think specifically to that first point I made there, with these words. You say allowing as if people are asking for your permission. Americans would be much less hostile towards one another if the religious and conservatives just learned how to mind their own damn business. Their words, not mine. It's not that difficult, they said. It's interesting, but I don't think it's true. In fact, this is how I responded to them. I'm saying allowing, as in seeing someone I believe to be in danger, and not at least trying to warn them. I'm saying allowing, as in, I saw someone sawing off the branch they were sitting on, and rather than telling them of the danger, because I was afraid I'd offend them, I just allowed that to happen. At the end of the day, if they're determined to keep sawing, I can't stop them, but not warning them, that would be wicked and hateful. They replied again. And that pretentious and self-righteous attitude is exactly why you people aren't liked. We're not asking to be warned. Mind your own damn business. Again, their words, not mine. If people wanted to hear about your Jesus, we would ask. But the thing is, minding my own business, I won't add that additional word. When I see someone heading for destruction and I have an opportunity to help them chase course, minding my own business isn't loving. It's hateful. If I see a person drowning and know that there's a life preserver ring that I could easily throw to them, it's not loving to wait for them to ask for me to throw it to them before I do so. It's not loving to not give them the chance to grab onto it just because they haven't asked yet. I throw the thing as close to them as I possibly can, and I plead with them to grab hold of it. At the end of the day, they still have to choose whether they're going to do that or not. But I still need to do what I need to do. If I see a kid playing in the street, and I know a car's coming, and the driver hasn't seen them, I'm not a good person if I let them keep playing in the street just because they don't realise that they're in danger yet. I call out to them. I do whatever I can to get them to move. If I have to, I'm running out into that street and facing the danger myself just to try and get their attention. My answer to them was simple. I won't mind my own business. I care about you way too much for that. You don't have to listen, but I love you all too much to not least give you the option to respond. What you do with that is up to you, even if it's hate me for it. But I need share the truth. I love you too much not to. I have to give them the opportunity, right? I have to present them with the truth and hope and pray that through the Holy Spirit they will embrace it and discover his love just as I have. And I hope you have too. Love asks, not what am I owed, but what can I give? And that, ultimately, is the question. What can I give? Jesus goes to the cross and he gives everything for us, freely, willingly. Jesus takes the burden of sin, the punishment that each of us are due. He takes upon himself your sin and mine to buy back our forgiveness. God is both the justifier and the just in that moment. So, the question remains for each of us. What can I give? What burdens may God be calling us to carry for others? Who might Jesus be asking you to see in the middle of your own struggles and care for? How can we plan to love others, not just today or for the future, but also eternally? How can we share the greatest gift, Jesus? Love asks, what can I give? Jesus challenges us through his life, through his actions, and through his death. What will you give? For me, the one who gave everything. What will our answer be? That's the challenge for each of us. This season, yes, but always, really. I hope that each of us find a way to answer that question for ourselves in a way that will bless others, but more importantly, will bless God, will make him known, will declare his truth and reflect his love and kindness to the world around us.